Hi everyone, this is the lecture to accompany Chapter 7 in your textbook. This is a brief discussion of the information you'll find in Chapter 7, so make sure you read it thoroughly. Okay, let's talk about supporting your ideas. In Chapter 6, we discussed how to find information. In this chapter, we'll talk about what kind of information you're looking for and how to use it in your speech. The information from other sources that you use in your speech is called supporting material. You'll need it to help illustrate and clarify the points you're trying to help us understand. And if it's a persuasive speech, this information will provide evidence for the claims you make, so you can prove them to be true. This chart from the textbook shows the many different kinds of supporting material, why they work, what they're useful for, and the strengths and weaknesses of each kind. Let's briefly go over them and then go a little more in depth on each. First, narratives or stories. Our need for and love of stories is deeply ingrained in us. You can get the audience to feel a specific emotion about the topic by relating a story. And if it's a story related to their culture, it can really resonate with them. Narrative strength is that it helps to dramatize the topic and get the audience to identify with it. Its weakness, however, is that it's a single view of the topic, and if you ramble too much while telling it, you can cause the audience to be distracted. Examples are brief references to things or events that help illustrate the point. They can definitely help to personalize the topic and make it come alive for the audience. The strength of examples lies in making the topic more concrete and simplifying complex concepts. Its weakness is that an example might be too specific, lack generalizability, and may not be representative of the topic as a whole. Then there are definitions. There are different kinds of definitions. Some affect the audience on an emotional level, others on a logical level. They help to establish a common meaning of a word, idea, or concept and help to clarify it. Depending on the type of definition, a weakness might be that it's only somewhat accurate and brings up other definitions associated with the terms. Testimony, the words and ideas of others, can affect us emotionally, culturally, and logically. Using testimony from credible sources can really enhance your own credibility as a speaker. Testimony is good for providing a specific opinion on your topic, especially if the person is an expert. Weaknesses are that even expert opinion can be biased, and the source might have a hidden agenda. Facts are simply observations based on experience. Some facts come from your own experience, others from many years of research and study by experts. They appeal to our sense of logic and help to define a topic and provide a foundation for that topic. They can be subject to multiple interpretations, however. Finally, statistics are numerical data that's been gathered and compiled by some person or entity. Numbers definitely appeal to our logical side. They can help the audience to see the magnitude of a problem and quantify it. They can also help to explain how something has changed over time or help us to predict what might happen in the future. If you don't use them effectively or ethically, though, they can be hard to understand and can be manipulated. Okay, let's go into more depth on each one of these types of supporting material. Narratives, stories, or anecdotes, they're all the same thing. They can be funny or dramatic, but their main purpose is to help the audience relate to the topic and appeal to our emotional side. For purposes of our speeches, narratives should generally be short and to the point. Don't drag them out too long, you simply don't have time. Narratives are a great way to start your speech because they immediately pull the audience into your topic. There are 4 different kinds of narratives that you can employ. First, your own stories. Relating a story about an experience you've had is a wonderful way to relate to your audience. This example of Bruce Springsteen telling an audience about listening to country music in his apartment as a young songwriter and how that affected him really helps the audience to see him in that situation. And of course, you can use other stories as well. You can often find good narratives while researching your topic. If you're focusing on an institution, like a business, university, corporation, or church, they often have stories about how they got started that could give the audience some background on them. And cultural stories like myths, fairy tales, or stories of cultural heroes, those are great ways to transmit the values and ideals of a particular culture. Then there are examples. These are references to things or events out there in the world that represent a larger group or class of things. For instance, if you're talking about community service, that's a bit vague, but you can say something like, a good example of community service would be volunteering to tutor elementary students in math or reading a few hours a week. That example helps the audience to understand what you're talking about. There are 3 types of examples: general, specific, and hypothetical. General examples are brief references to things that the speaker assumes the audience is already familiar with. Specific examples, however, require a bit of explanation for the audience to see how they represent the idea being discussed. The example I just gave you about volunteering to be a math or reading tutor is a specific example. The example on this slide, also discussed in the text, uses the Ford Fusion Hybrid as an example of the influence of Ford Motor Company on American culture. General and specific examples are based on actual things and events. Hypothetical examples, on the other hand, are examples that are based on imagination. In a hypothetical example, you ask the audience to imagine a thing or event, often putting themselves in the example, as in, imagine yourself in this particular situation. What would you do? Effective hypothetical examples should have some degree of plausibility in order to be most effective. Definitions explain what a word or phrase means or what something is. Definitions are often critical to an audience's understanding of your topic. Words have both denotative or dictionary definitions and connotative or emotional and personal meanings. Think of the word cat. The denotative meaning of the word is a small, furry, domestic feline animal. The connotative meanings of the word cat are many and dependent on our own emotional and personal associations with cats. If you like them, you would describe them with positive words. If you don't like them, you'd use different descriptions altogether. There are also definitions by function that explain what something is and how it works, and definition by analogy, where you describe something by comparing it to something else. The book gives lots of good examples of these kinds of definitions, so make sure you read those. Testimony is the words and ideas of others, their opinions related to the topic. Using testimony to support your ideas is a great way to add to your credibility as a speaker, but only if you find good sources that the audience believes are credible, which means you might have to explain to the audience who this person or entity is and why they're credible enough for you to talk about them. There are 3 basic types of testimony: expert, celebrity, and lay testimony. Expert testimony is just that, the words and opinions of someone whose knowledge, educational or career background, and experience qualifies them to speak to the topic. Now, we tend to think of people with advanced degrees on that topic as experts, and that's certainly the case. However, someone with a long career background would also be considered an expert, like your car mechanic who probably doesn't have a PhD but has worked on cars for over 25 years. That person could be considered an expert on cars anyway. If you use expert testimony, make sure that person is considered an expert on your topic, not some other topic, and make sure the audience understands this person's expertise so they will consider them credible. Then there's celebrity testimony, which are the opinions of someone with some level of fame. You have to be very careful with this one. Just because someone is well known does not make their opinion worth noting. They need to have some connection to the topic if you want to use their ideas. For instance, movie star George Clooney is very involved in charity work, and he even testified before Congress regarding his efforts to stop the genocide in Sudan. So, if your topic is about human rights and stopping genocide, his words would be a very good source of supporting material. You would need to explain his connection to the topic, though. Finally, lay testimony. This is testimony from regular people who have some connection to or experience with a topic, but they're not considered an expert. Lay testimony is great to use when you're trying to help the audience relate to the topic. For instance, if you're talking about cancer and how parents might deal with a child who has cancer, quoting a parent about their experience would be very powerful support. Again, you need to explain this person's connection to the topic. Finally, facts and statistics form the logical backbone of your supporting material. Facts are specific observations that have been made over and over enough that we generally assume them to be the case. Facts provide support for your logical appeals as long as you can show them to be true and they come from a source that the audience will accept as credible. Statistics are numerical data that have been counted and collected. They're particularly good for showing your audience how big a problem is or how something has changed over time. Statistics also appeal to logic, so students often think the more statistics they have, the better, but that's not true. Audiences can be overwhelmed if you try to give them too many numbers to think about. One or two relevant statistics are usually enough. Make sure the source of your statistics is credible, and be careful because statistics are easily manipulated. Make sure you let the audience know where they came from, what they mean, and how they support your points. But if you use good, solid facts and statistics, that is going to influence your credibility positively. And your credibility influences the believability of the facts and the stats that you quote. I do need to say something about the difference between facts, inferences, and opinions. Facts are specific observations that have generally been shown to be the case, although they can often be determined to be either true or false based on further observation. Inferences are the conclusions or interpretations you draw based on those facts. The book gives a good example of this. If in a class of 25 students, 21 students are present and 4 are absent, well, that's a fact. You can tell by observing, looking around the room and counting. So what might you infer from that? What conclusion might you draw? Any number of things, actually. Maybe you decide that those 4 people don't care about their education, or they overslept, or they all caught a cold from each other, or whatever else you can come up with. But whatever you decide to think about it, that's not a fact. It's your interpretation of the reason for that fact being a fact. And inferences are different from opinions, which are entirely subjective judgments about things that often have very little or nothing to do with the facts, and may often be based entirely on feelings. They may certainly have a place in a speech. Just remember that facts, inferences, and opinions are not the same thing. If you carefully evaluate your sources for their credibility, and you strive to gain credibility with your audience, they are more likely to accept what you say. As I said before, this is just a brief overview of the different kinds of supporting material you're going to be using in your speeches. The book goes into more detail and gives some good examples, so head on over to MindTap and read about it.